From the Startup Experts community, this is the Becoming Better podcast, and I'm its host, Jesse Freese. Elisabeth, it's so great to have you on the Becoming Better podcast. Thank you for joining us. Would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in your current role?
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. I am thrilled to be here. So, a little bit about myself. I started my professional career at Goldman Sachs. So, I worked at Goldman Sachs for 8 years. I, like a lot of people, fell into recruiting. So, I started recruiting coordination, then I did sourcing, then I became a recruiter. And then I also kind of fell into management and leadership. I'm a natural leader. There was a lot of volume being thrown our way, and I started to find systems and processes to make it manageable for a very small team. And so that was the start of my career. I then had kind of a jumping off point into the startup world. So I've been in startups for the last nearly 5 years, have really enjoyed it. I've continued to lead talent acquisition teams. Over the years, I've built deep subject matter expertise in technical recruiting in particular. So that's kind of my bread and butter. But in the last year, I actually had a really cool opportunity to do some work in people operations and understand that side of the house a bit better. Really enjoyed that time. I'm actually now transitioning back into talent acquisition, and I'm actually about to start a new role as the head of talent for Centrelink in just a couple weeks. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, well, congratulations. And, similar story to myself, actually. I didn't know what I wanted to do out of college, and I applied actually for a sales role. And when I sat down to interview them, they were kind enough to say, no, but how about you try some sourcing and recruiting? And that's actually how I got into the whole HR field, which was not foreseen at all, but it's been a joy to be in this space.
Yeah, I totally relate. Isn't it interesting how recruiting and sales are actually very similar in a lot of ways?
Very similar. Yeah. Just one in which you actually have your numbers on the board, and the other, you're not so much.
Maybe. I don't know. That's one of the things I like to think I've done well over the years as a leader is like set some clear expectations and, some of the more quantitative metrics for the team to help them have like some clear, a clear vision and line of sight for what they're working towards.
Yeah, no, that's great. Want to celebrate you for, being chosen earlier in the year as part of our 25 leaders to follow in 2025. So congratulations. Would love, in this conversation to learn a little bit more about yourself, professionally and as a human. So let's start off with, what is one thing that you like to do personally that others might not know that about you?
Yeah, I love the question, Jesse, and I love that you're sharing kind of this holistic view of me. I have to say, I'm a very multi-passionate person, so I could give you like 10 different answers, but I'll keep my answer simple for this. Like a lot of people going into my 30s, I've, learned to really embrace gardening. And that is like a true passion for me, particularly flower farming and flower gardening. And kind of a fun side project my husband and I have done is we took some family land and converted it into a peony farm. So we have a small like peony farm that we do, and that's brought a lot of joy into my life.
Oh, that's amazing. And how long have you been doing that?
Just a couple of years now. Really, it's really kind of taken off in the last 3 years.
Okay. Yeah. The reason I ask is, my wife and I went into San Francisco maybe a month or two ago, and there was a garden show that we walked through. And I was absolutely blown away. They had amazing flowers, and some of them had been judged. And I didn't know there were so many different varietals and all of the colors, and just it was such an interesting experience.
Yeah, it's a totally different world than HR and recruiting. But yeah, we have something like 20 different varieties on our farm, which is honestly a small number compared to how many exist. But yeah, it's pretty astounding.
Okay, well, if you want to like level up and start having them judged, let me know when you're in town for this show. And
might be a few more years out for that, but we'll have to keep it on the radar.
Okay, it's a whole thing. I mean, there were people that were into it.
We'll start with the local, and then we'll get to California at some point.
Okay, yeah, I understand. Coming out of the regional, I get it.
There you go.
So, this is, a podcast, and frankly, our whole community is about becoming better, learning from one another. Is there something that you've learned recently that, has made you a better human, better teammate, just a better leader?
Yeah. Oh gosh, where to start? But the first answer that came to my mind, Jesse, is honestly the power of simplicity, actually. That's something I've really been leaning into this year as a leader in particular. I've spent a lot of my career really digging into the details and analyzing and, dissecting every piece of information to find the right outcome. And I've started to lean in as I've gotten more senior and I've led bigger teams, had bigger impact. I've started to really lean into the power of simplicity to create, clarity and really orient a team around a common vision, right? And what we're working towards. And so I'm happy to expound on that if you'd like, but simplicity is kind of
Yeah,
my
no,
word of
do.
the year as a professional.
Yeah, no, please tell us a little bit more.
So, in the world today, with so much focus on AI and how AI is going to disrupt our function, everyone's function, right? It's going to require us to up level in a way that we haven't had to before. I really lean into, again, this concept of simplicity and how you have to start somewhere, right? And take one step at a time. And again, you have to have this clear kind of forward vision, which is kind of challenging in the age of AI, right? Because the reality is none of us have the crystal ball. We don't actually know what's going to happen with AI 5 years from now. And so we orient around, again, like a common mission and vision that helps us to understand where we're going, what the end goal is, and then we can work in small steps towards how we can use AI to get us there, right? And it's not like we have to have all the answers right now. I've found that really helps my team in terms of mindset to think about it again as like bite-sized pieces, and again against like a future looking vision and mission that's not all AI, right? Like AI is going to help us get there, but the end goal isn't all things AI, right? So that's how I'm thinking about it today.
Yeah, no, that's great. I thank you for elaborating. Um, you mentioned AI, and certainly that's a new initiative, something that we're all excited about. But is there something else in your life that you're really excited and you're exploring, or a trend? We're almost at the end of 2025, which is amazing because I don't know
Yeah.
where the year went. So it's probably going to be a 2026 initiative. But anything to share?
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple quick thoughts here, Jesse. One, on the topic of AI, one thing I really am excited about and love about AI is I feel like it's making talent acquisition a more human centric function than it ever has been before, right? We
Okay.
can really spend time on human connection. And in the wake of that thought, we're in what a lot of people are calling the great stay, right? We've seen a little less movement, less attrition for companies, right? It's been a little harder to pull good talent than maybe it has in some years past. And so this is something I've been thinking a lot about. And so a lot of my focus has been not just on short term and how we're filling requisitions, but in thinking about how are we building connection? How are we creating and nurturing relationships that will have us in a good spot when the market starts to really, pick up again, where we have people that immediately think about our company, our brand, as soon as the opportunity presents itself, if you will, right? So this is one of those periods for recruiting where there's still plenty of short-term work to do, but there's some really cool, ways we can be thinking about our brand and EVP and how we're nurturing talent and building connection.
That's great. Let's dive into that a little bit further because I have a couple
Hmm.
follow-up questions.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, on one end, when I used to lead recruiting at a couple organizations, we used to have these conversations around, the outreach that we did was really marketing on behalf of the company.
Hmm.
We touched more people in the recruiting pipeline than we did actual customers. So,
Yeah.
working on that experience. I can respect that. But you said something about AI and how it's becoming, or it's enabling your team to be more human and be more connected. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yes, I love this question. So a lot of it right now is they're really simple things, right? Less time scheduling, less time sourcing so that our team can be spending time on the phone, meeting candidates in person for coffee, right? To truly build relationships. I remember when I started my career in recruiting, Jesse, it was all very transactional, candidly, right? We had a list of questions to go through. We went through the questions as quickly as we could so we could move on to the next one because we had to talk to as many candidates as we possibly could,
Mhm.
right? And now I'm having real conversations, right? And I have been for many years, but my team is doing the same thing, and it's building such a deeper connection with candidates, right? In a way that I haven't experienced before in my career, candidly,
Uh-huh.
right? It just allows you to really lean into the why and the motivations, right? Which has always been the goal as recruiters, but it just frees up more headspace, is what I would say. So AI, like I mentioned, I think there's so much possibility for additional things it can do beyond the scope of what, we're using it for today. But honestly, there's so much time savings in those like low hanging fruit with scheduling and sourcing that we're seeing some really clear wins early on.
Okay. So you're referencing scheduling and sourcing and automation of that to free up time for the one-on-one human connections. Have you, do you have any opinions about, the quality of communication that you are automating with potential candidates? I mean, and to give a little more context, I worked for a recruitment process outsourcing firm for many years, and
Mm-hmm.
I think we took great pride at the time of closing out the process with everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that, I think everybody knows most organizations don't, and you hear that
Yep.
consistent feedback among candidates that, I'd never heard back, and I had invested so much time and energy into this. And, that was, again, protecting your brand. It's a good idea to close
Yep.
out with everybody and, keep those, be respectful of people's times. I,
Mm-hmm.
are you thinking about quality of communication and feedback to individuals that might not get the job?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the quality piece, like quality of communications, I think we haven't fully gotten there in terms of how you can use AI to craft like really personalized messages. I see that coming. Um, I guess a shout out and like feature request to my favorite ATS tool, which is Ashby. They have a phenomenal tool, and I see this being something that we'll have sooner than later. We definitely have done a lot of work to craft really thoughtful communications, but right now it's still pretty templatized, candidly, Jesse.
Yeah.
But that is what we're working towards. Is that's a huge opportunity to introduce Gen AI to make it sound really personalized, right?
Yeah.
I do think there's a balance strike here in terms of how much feedback you share, right? Or like
Yeah.
what you personalize. There always is. You want to put some guardrails in place, but absolutely, a powerful way to build more rapport with candidates in a way that can feel, very human centric, but also minimize the amount of time since AI is helping to generate that. So the way I see it, Jesse, we may get to some point, but the way I see it, we will still have a human checking the process, if you will, right? Like AI can generate a response and we can do a quick checkbox, right? And maybe that's something, a junior recruiter on the team will handle, if you will, of like, let's just quickly check, what's been generated here and click the boxes. But it is a really powerful way, to your point, to build brand, to build relationships in the market when you're able to close the process in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears a little bit. So much of, our conversations within the community are all about, trying to improve one another. And I've had
Mhm.
the greatest learnings through the mistakes that I've made in my career.
Yep.
And I think that's pretty common among anyone that's been
Yeah.
in a job role. Is there one hindsight moment for you that you'd like to share out?
There are many. That's my first answer. There are many, to your
Yeah.
point. But I think one of the most powerful learning moments for me, Jesse, was when I was able to start really connecting the dots between recruiting and people operations and all things HR to business strategy and business outcomes,
Mm.
right? It took me a lot longer than I would like to admit to like really connect the dots there. But that has completely shifted my perspective as a leader, candidly, in the way that I'm able to kind of zoom out and think about where we're going and where we're spending our time and where we're focusing, right? So that has really been the biggest learning opportunity for me is how are we leaning into the business? How are we working closely with them to really understand the pain points and again help them drive outcomes, right? There's so many examples we could give here. But this, like for example, I'll give you one quick example because I know these
Please.
are
Yeah. I
powerful.
wanted to dive into this a little bit further.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, like on the engineering side, right? I mentioned technical recruiting has kind of been my primary focus.
Mhm.
When I was able to work closely with the teams to really understand the impact of a role and really understand their strategy and what they were trying to do with talent coming into the organization, I was able to one help advise them on how we prioritize our focus, right? So we're not like, you know, so we're not spreading everyone thin across 15
Uh-huh.
roles, but we're able to like really focus in on the most critical 5 roles and then build out from there. That was a huge unlock for everyone. Um, but when you're able to communicate both to the interviewers, the hiring manager, to candidates, the impact that they can have in a role, even for junior roles, Jesse, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're going to contribute to XYZ, which ultimately helps us unlock this goal for the company or this revenue stream. That is huge, right? And like, you can see the light turn on for candidates when you're able to have that conversation. And even for interviewers, especially in the startup world, we struggle with interviewer burnout, right? Like, you have small teams, you're really asking a lot of your, senior folks to be involved in the interview process. So when they understand the impact piece as well and understand how you're all working together in concert, it's just, it's so powerful. So there's so much more I could say. I mean, part of this is just tactical, Jesse, in terms of how you embed your team and how they spend their time sitting with the business. There's a balance to strike there, but that has made all the difference in how I approach talent acquisition and recruiting. Less transactional, more strategic partner.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, we all work as one team, so really thinking about it and really focusing on, the why and how to properly align makes a lot of sense. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up, again, want to appreciate you for being selected as a 25 leaders to follow in 2025 and super awesome to sit down with you. And, I can tell your passion and we could do an hour here easy, I think, based on, all your energy and the things that you have to share. Before we conclude, is there one quick piece of advice that you would share to your peers that might benefit them?
I mean, the best advice I think I could give in this day and age is to stay curious, right? Like, stay curious, keep learning, keep that growth mindset. That's more critical than ever, especially with the advent of AI and the way it's going to completely reshape how we operate. But stay curious about the business, ask all the questions, lean in, especially with AI. We have this like thought partner at our fingertips. You have to be careful because of hallucination and validation, but you have this thought partner at your fingertips. Like, use that curiosity as a strength to better understand, all of the different aspects of our functions and the business that will make you an even better partner and a better leader.
Love that. Yeah, no, thank you. Well, thank you for your time. Appreciate you sitting down. And again, congratulations. And look forward to potentially seeing you in Salt Lake City sometime.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Jesse. Great to speak with you today.
Thank you for listening to this Becoming Better with Startup Experts discussion. If you're interested in learning more about our community and perhaps joining, please visit www.startupexperts.us.